Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're kind of plugged into the world of electrical contractors, but not in the way you might think.
Right.
Forget circuits and wiring for a minute,
Yeah.
because we're tackling something even more critical, risk management.
That's right. We're going beyond the nuts and bolts to explore the often overlooked aspects of running a successful electrical contracting business.
Okay, so let's get energized and dive in. We have some great material from BDI Insurance that lays out common exposures for electrical contractors.
Yeah.
And some key things to think about when it comes to coverage.
Right.
But before we get into the nitty-gritty of insurance,
Sure.
I'm curious, what's the landscape looking like for electrical contractors these days?
Well, the industry is booming.
Really?
Which is exciting. There's a huge demand for skilled electricians right now, driven by things like new construction projects, renovations, and the growing need for energy-efficient systems.
So it's a great time to be in the business?
Absolutely. But like with any booming industry,
Right.
there are also challenges.
Like what?
We're seeing a shortage of qualified workers.
Oh, interesting.
Which is driving up labor costs.
Okay.
And the rising cost of materials, especially copper,
I bet.
is putting a strain on profit margins.
Wow. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
All this opportunity comes with a whole new set of priorities.
Exactly. And that's where risk management becomes so important.
Okay.
Because the more projects you take on, the more employees you hire, the greater your exposure to potential risks.
So it's not just about keeping the lights on.
Right.
It's about keeping the business safe and sound.
Exactly.
Let's start with something I think every contractor can relate to. Property risks.
Sure.
I mean, tools and equipment are the lifeblood of any electrical contractor.
Absolutely. And you have to think about all the different places those assets are vulnerable in the shop, at the job site, even in transit.
Yeah.
We've seen cases where contractors have had their entire van full of tools stolen overnight.
Really?
Basically putting them out of business.
Ouch. I hadn't thought about it like that. That's a contractor's worst nightmare.
Yeah.
And it's not just theft we're talking about, right?
Right. Think about fire vandalism, even severe weather events.
Oh, wow.
We had a client who lost thousands of dollars worth of equipment when a flash flood hit their storage facility.
It's scary to think about how quickly things can go wrong.
It is.
And I imagine these losses go way beyond just the cost of replacing the equipment.
You're absolutely right. There's the lost productivity, the potential project delays, even the hit to your reputation. It can have a ripple effect throughout your entire business.
Okay, so you've definitely convinced me that property risks are a serious issue.
Yeah.
And speaking of being on the move, let's talk about auto risks.
Sure.
I imagine there's a lot that can go wrong when you're constantly driving between job sites.
You're telling me we've seen it all: accidents caused by distracted driving, speeding, even just plain old bad luck.
Yeah.
And when you've got a van loaded down with expensive tools and equipment,
right?
The potential for damage and liability is huge.
And it's not just about fender benders, right?
Definitely not. What if one of your employees causes a serious accident?
Oh, no.
The legal and medical expenses could be astronomical.
You're making me sweat just thinking about it. Okay, so we've talked about protecting your stuff and your vehicles.
Right.
But what about the most valuable asset of all your employees?
Yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting to me.
Yes. Employee safety is paramount.
Okay.
And in the electrical industry, the risks are significant.
Yeah.
I mean, you're dealing with high voltage, hazardous environments and physically demanding work.
Right.
One wrong move can have devastating consequences.
That's true. And the obvious risk is electrocution, right? But I'm guessing there's more to it than that.
You bet. We see a lot of musculoskeletal injuries from repetitive motions, lifting heavy objects and working in awkward positions.
Right.
Then there's the risk of falls, especially when working at heights.
Okay.
And don't forget about the long-term effects of noise exposure.
Really?
Hearing loss is a serious issue for many electricians.
Wow, I hadn't considered the hearing loss aspect. That's a silent threat that can have a major impact on someone's life down the road.
It can.
So it sounds like protecting your team is not just a legal obligation, but also a moral one.
Absolutely. When an employee gets hurt, it's a blow to the entire company.
Yeah.
It affects morale, productivity, and your reputation.
Right.
Plus, the financial costs can be crippling.
I bet.
Medical bills, workers' compensation claims, even potential lawsuits.
That's a lot to think about.
It is.
And it's something that electrical contractors just can't ignore.
You're right about that. It's a tough reality, but one that electrical contractors can't afford to ignore. And it's not just about physical injuries either. We're seeing more and more cases of mental health issues in the construction industry.
Really? Like what?
Things like stress, anxiety, and burnout.
That's a really good point. The pressure to meet deadlines, the long hours, the physically demanding work, it all takes a toll.
It does, and it's something that business owners need to be mindful of. Creating a supportive work environment and providing resources for mental health is just as important as physical safety measures.
Okay, so we've covered property risks, auto risks, and employee safety. What other landmines are lurking out there for electrical contractors?
Well, one that keeps me up at night is liability.
Liability. I think I have a general idea of what that means, but can you break it down for me in the context of an electrical contractor?
Sure, liability essentially means you're responsible if someone gets hurt or their property is damaged because of your work.
Okay.
Think about it. You're dealing with electricity,
Right.
which is inherently dangerous.
Yeah?
If something goes wrong, the consequences can be severe.
Yeah, like if faulty wiring causes a fire, or if someone gets electrocuted due to a mistake made during installation.
Exactly, and it's not just limited to what happens during the job.
Okay.
There's also something called completed operations risk,
Completed operations.
which means you can be held liable for problems that arise even after you've finished a project.
So even if you think you're in the clear, something could come back to bite you months or even years later.
Unfortunately, yes. We had a case where an electrician installed a ceiling fan and everything seemed fine, but a few months later, the fan fell down and injured the homeowner. It turned out there was a defect in the mounting bracket, and the electrician was held liable.
Wow, that's a cautionary tale. It
Yeah,
makes you realize that liability is like a long shadow that follows you around.
it really is. And it's not just about physical harm either. What if you make a mistake on a wiring diagram and it causes damage to expensive equipment?
Oh man.
Or what if you accidentally cut a fiber optic cable while digging a trench?
Oh man, I hadn't even thought about that. It sounds like the potential for financial ruin is very real.
It is, and that's why having the right insurance coverage is so critical for electrical contractors. It's your safety net, your financial backstop when things go wrong.
Okay, so let's talk about that safety net. What are some of the key types of insurance that electrical contractors should absolutely have?
Well, first and foremost is commercial general liability insurance.
Okay.
This is your basic coverage that protects you from third-party claims of bodily injury or property damage.
So that would cover things like the ceiling fan example you just gave.
Exactly. It would help cover the homeowner's medical expenses and any legal fees you might incur.
Okay, that's a must-have. What else?
Next up is workers' compensation insurance.
Okay.
This is required by law in most states,
Right?
and it covers medical expenses and lost wages for employees who are injured on the job.
It's a no-brainer for any business with employees, especially in a high-risk industry like electrical contracting. But what about those tools and equipment we talked about earlier? How do you protect those?
Commercial property insurance is key for that. It covers damage or loss to your physical assets,
Okay.
including tools, equipment inventory, and even your office space.
So if a fire rips through your warehouse, this insurance would help you get back on your feet.
That's the idea. It helps you replace or repair what's been damaged or stolen so you can keep operating.
Okay, so we've got liability, workers' comp, and property insurance covered. What about all that driving between job sites?
That's where commercial auto insurance comes in. This covers your vehicles if they're involved in an accident,
Right?
including damage to the vehicle itself and liability for injuries to others.
Right, and it's important to make sure you have enough coverage, especially if your employees are driving company vehicles.
Absolutely, you don't want to skimp on auto insurance.
You know, thinking back to what you said earlier about potential damage to property or underground lines, is there insurance to protect against those kinds of mistakes?
There is. That's where professional liability insurance comes in. It's also known as errors and omissions insurance, or E&O.
Okay, tell me more about that.
It's designed to protect you if you make a professional mistake that causes financial harm to somewhere else. For example, if you miscalculate a load and it causes damage to a client's equipment, or if you provide faulty advice that leads to a financial loss.
It's like insurance for your brain.
Exactly. It protects you from the financial consequences of those oops moments that can happen to even the best professionals.
That peace of mind must be worth its weight in gold.
You said it. Knowing you have that safety net allows you to focus on your work and grow your business without constantly worrying about what could go wrong.
So far, we've talked about a lot of traditional insurance types, but we're living in a digital world now. What about things like cyber attacks? Is that something electrical contractors need to be worried about?
It absolutely is. In fact, cyber risks are one of the fastest growing threats to businesses of all sizes, including electrical contractors.
Really, I guess I just assumed those kinds of attacks were targeted at big corporations or tech companies.
That's a common misconception, but the truth is hackers are looking for any vulnerability they can exploit, and small businesses are often easier targets because they tend to have weaker security systems.
So what kind of cyber risks are we talking about here?
Data breaches are a big one. If you store sensitive customer information like names, addresses, or credit card numbers, you could be a target for hackers.
And those data breaches can be costly, right? I've heard horror stories about businesses having to pay millions in fines and legal fees.
It can be devastating. And the reputational damage can be even worse. Customers lose trust in businesses that can't protect their data.
That's a nightmare scenario. But beyond data breaches, what other cyber threats should electrical contractors be aware of?
Ransomware attacks are becoming increasingly common.
Ransomware?
This is where hackers lock down your computer systems and demand payment to release them.
Oh, wow. It's like digital extortion.
Exactly. And then there's phishing scams,
Okay.
where hackers send emails that appear to be from legitimate sources in an attempt to trick you into giving up sensitive information.
So it's not just about having strong firewalls and antivirus software anymore. It's about being vigilant and educating your employees about these threats.
Absolutely. Human error is often the weakest link in cybersecurity.
Okay. So it sounds like cyber risks are a very real threat that electrical contractors need to take seriously. What's the best way to protect themselves?
Well, there are several things you can do.
Okay.
First, make sure you have strong cybersecurity measures in place,
Like what?
like firewalls, antivirus software, and multi-factor authentication.
But you said earlier that human error is often the problem. So how do you address that?
Training is key. Educate your employees about phishing scams, ransomware, and other cyber threats. Make sure they know how to spot suspicious emails and what to do if they think they've been compromised.
That makes sense. And I imagine having a good backup and recovery plan is essential as well.
It's critical. Regularly back up your data to a secure offsite location so that if your systems are compromised, you can restore them quickly and minimize downtime.
Okay, those are all great tips for preventing cyber attacks. But what happens if, despite your best efforts, you do get hit? Is there insurance for that?
There is. Cyber liability insurance is specifically designed to help businesses recover from cyber attacks. It can cover things like data recovery, cost, legal fees, notification expenses, and even business interruption losses.
Wow, that's a lifesaver. It sounds like cyber liability insurance is becoming as essential as general liability insurance these days.
It really is. In today's digital world, you can't afford to be without it.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. General liability, workers' comp, property insurance, auto insurance, professional liability, and even cyber liability. It seems like there's a specific type of insurance for every risk imaginable.
There really is, and that can feel overwhelming,
It can.
especially for busy business owners who are already juggling a million things.
Right. It makes you wonder if there's some secret formula for figuring out exactly what coverage you need.
Well, there's no magic formula,
Okay.
but there are some key things to consider.
Like what?
First, think about the specific risks your business faces.
Okay.
What kind of work do you do? Where do you operate? How many employees do you have? The answers to these questions will help you narrow down the types of insurance that are most relevant to your situation.
So it's about tailoring your coverage to your unique needs.
Exactly. One size doesn't fit all when it comes to insurance.
That makes sense. What other factors should you consider?
Think about your risk tolerance. How much financial risk are you comfortable taking on?
Okay.
If you're highly risk averse, you'll probably want more comprehensive coverage.
Right. And I imagine the financial stability of the insurance company is important too.
Absolutely. You want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable company that has the financial resources to pay out claims if something happens.
Those are all great points. It sounds like choosing the right insurance partner is just as important as choosing the right type of coverage.
Couldn't agree more. You want an insurance advisor who understands your industry, who takes the time to get to know your business, and who can provide expert guidance and support.
So it's about more than just getting a quote and signing on the dotted line.
It's about building a relationship with someone you can trust to help you navigate the complex world of insurance.
That makes a lot of sense. We've talked about a ton of different types of insurance and some key things to consider when choosing coverage. But for someone who's just starting out in the electrical contracting business, or maybe someone who's been doing it for years but hasn't really thought about insurance in depth, it can still feel overwhelming. Where do you even begin?
That's a great question, and it's one we get asked all the time. The best advice I can give is to start by talking to an insurance professional who specializes in working with electrical contractors.
Like BDI insurance? Shameless plug, I know, but seriously, they're the experts, right?
Absolutely. They have a deep understanding of the risks electrical contractors face and can help you create a comprehensive insurance plan that meets your specific needs and budget.
So it's about finding a trusted advisor who can guide you through the process and make sure you're properly protected.
Exactly. Don't try to go it alone.
That's really solid advice. We'll be back in just a moment for the final part of our deep dive into risk management for electrical contractors. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring this multifaceted world of risk management for electrical contractors.
It is multifaceted.
And I have to say I'm learning a ton. We've covered the gamut of risks from property and liability to the ever-evolving world of cyber threats. And we've talked about the importance of having the right insurance coverage in place. But before we wrap things up, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something we haven't touched on yet, the human element.
That's such a crucial aspect of risk management that often gets overlooked. At the end of the day, it's your people who are on the front lines interacting with those risks every single day.
Exactly. You could have the best insurance policies in the world, But if your employees aren't trained properly or don't have a strong safety culture, you're still vulnerable.
Couldn't agree more. Building a culture of safety within your organization is paramount.
So how do you actually do that? Where do you even begin?
It all starts at the top with leadership. Owners and managers need to make it crystal clear that safety is a non-negotiable priority, not just a box to be ticked.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Precisely. It's about leading by example, investing in proper training programs, providing the right safety equipment, and most importantly, enforcing safety protocols consistently.
That makes sense. But it's not just about rules and regulations, right? It's also about creating an environment where employees feel comfortable speaking up if they see something unsafe.
Absolutely. You want to foster open communication and encourage feedback. No one should ever be afraid to report a hazard or raise a concern. And when they do, it's critical to take those concerns seriously and address them promptly.
It's about showing your employees that you value their input and that you're truly committed to their well-being.
Exactly. It's about building trust and mutual respect.
So beyond setting a good example and encouraging open communication, what are some other practical steps electrical contractors can take to cultivate that safety-first mindset?
Regular safety meetings are a great way to keep safety top of mind and reinforce best practices.
I imagine those meetings are also a good opportunity for employees to share their experiences and learn from each other.
Absolutely. It's about creating a collaborative learning environment where everyone feels empowered to contribute. And don't underestimate the power of toolbox talk.
Toolbox docs.
Those short, informal discussions held right at the job site can be incredibly effective in addressing specific hazards or tasks that are coming up on a particular project.
Right. It's about keeping safety front and center, not just relegating it to a once-a-month meeting. What about incentives? Do you think rewarding employees for their commitment to safety is a good idea?
I'm a huge fan of positive reinforcement. Recognizing and rewarding employees for their safe work habits is a fantastic way to reinforce the importance of safety and show them that their efforts are appreciated.
Like how?
You could give out safety awards, bonuses, or even just public recognition at a company meeting.
Makes sense.
Exactly. It's about making safety a core value, something that's celebrated and ingrained in the company culture.
It's about creating a win-win situation where everyone benefits.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A safer work environment leads to fewer accidents and injuries, which in turn translates to lower insurance premiums, increased productivity, and a boost in employee morale. It's a virtuous cycle that starts with a commitment to putting safety first.
And at the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? Protecting your people, your business, and your peace of mind.
Absolutely. Risk management is not just about avoiding negative outcomes. It's about creating a positive and thriving business environment where everyone can succeed.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this electrifying deep dive into the world of risk management for electrical contractors. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I hope our listeners have found this information valuable and insightful.
I hope so too. And remember, if you have any questions or need guidance on developing a comprehensive risk management plan tailored to our specific needs, don't hesitate to reach out to the experts at BDI Insurance. They're a fantastic resource and a true partner for electrical contractors looking to protect their businesses and build a brighter future.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.